This is Dave Kendall with Election One-on-One, a series of exclusive interviews with representatives of the leading parties contesting Thailand's general election on March 24th. Today, I speak with Abhisit Wechachiwa, leader of the Democrat Party, and ask him about his plans to help the poor, whether he would amend the 2017 constitution, how closely he would work with pro-military party Palang Pracharat, and his hopes to become a popularly elected Prime Minister. Kun Abhisit, thank you very much for making time in your hectic schedule to talk to us. Why should people vote Democrat in the election on March 24th?
Because we have the policies and the personnel that will revive the economy quickly. We have spelled out our plans very clearly in terms of increasing purchasing power for farmers and for workers, as well as improving the welfare card scheme so that money would circulate among the local shops and community, so that we will enable the rural people as well as small communities to revive their local economies. Secondly, with all the good policies, but without stability, we don't think that the country can move ahead. The Democrat Party provides a realistic path out of the conflicts of the past, because we will make sure that our government is democratic, while at the same time has the honesty and integrity and refrain from the abuses of power that have led to the crisis in the past.
Let's talk about some of your campaign pledges, because they include a minimum of 120,000 baht per year for laborers, 1,000 per month for seniors, 800 per month for those earning less than 100,000 a year. How will you pay for all that?
We have on our website assessed the cost of all our programs, including those that you've mentioned. And we have also said that we will be able to reduce budgets on other items, expand the tax base, as well as improve the efficiency of tax collection, collect more taxes from higher growth as a result of these policies, and we are well within the spending limits that will preserve fiscal discipline.
Your platform includes guaranteeing farmers 10,000 baht per ton of rice. How is that different from the Yingluck government's rice subsidy, other than the amount is smaller?
Oh, so there's a world of difference, because our program is in fact an income subsidy program. So we implemented this 9 years ago with success. The idea is that we do not engage in any kind of purchasing of rice or any other agricultural products. We will calculate the cost to farmers. We will set a target price that they should be getting so that they have sufficient income. And if they sell rice below that rate, they get the difference being subsidized by the government. So there is no trading involved. We've done this before, and it's clear. There's a world of difference. Number one, the fiscal burden is not big, because we can pretty much calculate the fiscal burden. It's all transparent. Secondly, because we do not engage in buying rice, the government does not get involved in the trading of rice. So the market mechanism continues to work as far as rice trading is concerned, thereby avoiding all the problems about stockpiling the rice, managing that stock, selling that stock, and it won't even affect the competitiveness of rice export. When we implemented this last time, we continue to be the biggest exporter of rice. And of course, finally, there is no room for corruption, because the money is directly transferred to farmers.
Any of the campaign pledges that you are proposing, could any of them violate the anti-populism law? And do you support that law, or would you amend it?
Well, there isn't strictly an anti-populism law. There appears to be some provisions to try to contain it by asking political parties to provide details about the costing of various items and the risk involved. And we've done that. So we're complying with the laws that have been passed. we actually wish other parties would do the same, because at least there should be transparency about the cost of the various programs and how that the revenues can be raised.
What's your attitude toward the 20-year national strategy? Would you seek to amend the 2017 Constitution, or are you happy with it? And do you support the completely non-elected Senate?
I would try to sum up the 20-year plan in one word. It's an inconvenience. I say that, so obviously I'm not happy with it. But, the broad target set by the plan is not something that I don't think any political party opposes. But to try to write a detailed plan 20 years ahead just doesn't make sense to us, given the pace of changes in the world today. What we see is that while the broad objectives or targets would probably be no problem for our policies, some of the details might become an obstacle. And our attitude to that is that we'll fix it by either amending the plan, getting the committee involved to see that there is necessity for change. And if that proves to be impossible to do, we will eventually have to try to amend the Constitution and the laws. But we don't want to, go into government and the first thing we do is try to amend the Constitution, which is actually beyond the powers even of the 500 MPs that are elected, because it requires the support of some of the senators, and make this a political issue of conflict. So we'll do what we need to do as far as policies are concerned, and we just have to make sure that the 20-year plan doesn't get in the way. Now, as far as the provision of the Constitution on the Senate is concerned, we don't agree with having a non-elected Senate with this much power. You have to choose. I mean, you either have a Senate that is directly elected by the people and give it more power, or you have a non-elected Senate, which some democratic parties, some non-democratic countries do have, but with limited power.
So what would you do in this instance? Would you seek to amend the Constitution and change the makeup of the Senate?
Well, we'd like to amend the Constitution, but it has to be made clear that anyone promising to amend the Constitution has to tell the truth, that even if all 500 MPs agree to amend the Constitution, it still cannot be done unless you get the support from the Senate. So our plan is that we need to build a consensus among the people that the Constitution needs to be amended on various issues. And we have to be upfront with what kind of issues we want to be amended broadly to make the Constitution more democratic, conform to the norms of democracy, of liberal democracies, and on some technical issues where we feel are problems. And we need to build that consensus in order to put pressure on the senators to agree to amend the Constitution. Otherwise, it cannot be done.
But are you saying your ultimate goal is to have an elected Senate in place in Thailand?
Yes, but then we have to be careful about the role of the Senate, where the assumption is that they would be neutral, because it's not realistic to have an elected Senate that is politically neutral.
Now, in 2014, just before the coup, you told the BBC that everyone wants an election, but reform is necessary first. Well, it's taken 5 years for an election to take place. Are the reforms you wanted now in place?
Well, I should set the record straight. I said that elections are needed, but some kind of transition to guarantee reforms should take place first. So that, because to be realistic, you cannot expect reforms to be completed before elections are held. It would be too long. That was my stance. It's no different from all the Western countries' stance towards Venezuela now, where they are demanding some kind of transitional arrangement before elections are held, so that elections are credible to all sides. So just to put that straight as far as the past is concerned. So the question is, have any of the reforms been achieved? And the short answer to that is no. We see no real progress on political reform, police reform, media reform, economic reforms. I think that's pretty much the assessment that Thai people have on the last 5 years.
Now, it's possible, Kun Abhisit, that you will hold the balance of power in the new House. You've said that you will not support General Prayut as Prime Minister, but would you form a coalition government with Palang Pracharat?
Well, my objective is that we should form a government that will not be corrupt, that will not carry on with non-democratic practices. So if Palang Pracharat can conform to that, we are open to talks with them.
So that's a conditional yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how do you feel about Pheu Thai and Future Forward's plans to cut military spending and end conscription?
Well, the issue of conscription is a specific issue. We also want to work towards a 100% volunteering system for getting military personnel. We think it can be done. It's part of our policy because we think that providing more incentives for people to join the army will be enough to push the number to the required number. And also you can cut down on some of the unnecessary number of people who are now, or shall we say, not being used for the kind of purposes that we hope they have been drafted to do. So we agree with the policy that we can move towards a 100% volunteer system. The issue of budget cuts for the military is different. We feel that, particularly Pheu Thai is all talk. Because if you look back at history, the last couple of decades, only Democrat governments have actually cut military budgets. When I was Prime Minister, I went in with a higher budget for the military than when I left office. So we've done it before. It's no big deal. We just didn't make it a political issue. We just have to talk to the armed forces about the fiscal conditions and assess the projects that they are proposing. And certainly during my time, they were reasonable enough to comply with my decision to cut their budget. It's not necessary to make it a political point. You have to ask Pheu Thai why, when they were in power, they've never done this. But when they feel that they could use this as a political issue against maybe an unpopular government seen to be led by the military, they're bringing this up. And the cuts that they're talking about, 10%, would only give you, 17 billion baht? We can then identify cuts in other items on the budget that would give us more money to finance some of the programs that we are proposing.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that you wanted to increase the efficiency of tax collection, but both Pheu Thai and Future Forward are stressing redistributing wealth. Now, by some measures, Thailand has the most extreme gap between rich and poor in the world. How seriously do you take this problem? What will you do to tackle this?
We do take this problem very seriously. But when you asked the question last time, it was all about raising revenue. Where we are interested in tax reforms is when we want to do reform for redistribution. So the difference is clear. Pheu Thai is proposing to reduce corporate income tax. We say that corporate income tax should be reduced only for SMEs. There's no need to reduce corporate income tax for big companies. That's the difference. Other parties are proposing to reduce personal income tax on all brackets. We say personal income tax should be reduced only for the lower brackets. The people who can afford to pay more should pay more. We are also proposing to collect more taxes from the stock market, from people who have a lot of land, and also on the big tech companies, particularly multinationals that need to contribute more to the Thai economy. These are all for redistributive purposes. It's a different issue from wanting to change taxes to raise revenue. Secondly, on the problem of inequality itself, we have a 7-point plan. Number one is that we are proposing that the government should now use a variety of indicators to guide their economic policies and assess their policies, not just GDP or GDP per head. We should be looking at median income. We should be looking at household income in the lowest brackets and household debts, so that we can tailor our policies towards redistribution more. Secondly, allocation of resources, particularly land, water, that needs to be changed. We have programs that will be able to get better access to land holding and also water for the poor. Thirdly, access to health and education needs to be made more equitable. We have a plan for that, so that there is decentralization towards schools, also raising the profiles of primary care closer to communities to allow better access, and through better use of technology also to respond to poor people's needs and rural people's needs. Fourthly, we need to increase the welfare system in general. But we have to do it in a gradual way, because Thailand collects only 17%, 18% of GDP in taxes. So there is need to extend rights of the elderly, of children. We're talking about universal child benefit as part of our policy. So yes, there will be an extension of the welfare program, but it needs to be done in a careful way to make sure that the fiscal situation can be managed. Fifthly, there needs to be a reform of the tax system, which I've already mentioned, with a view to make the whole tax system more progressive. Sixth, we will actually address the issue of monopolies, both in the public and private sectors. We have to make sure that there is no use of dominant market power, so that it affects the degree of competition among the producers and entrepreneurs. And at the same time, there is fairness to consumers also. And finally, you need to have a clean political system. If political parties are owned or owe debt to big financiers, groups of families, there's no way that you can achieve better distribution of income.
Last year, you won the party leadership contest over Warong Det Gitwikrom, the former member of the PDRC, the yellow shirt group that helped bring down the Yingluck government. But the victory was quite narrow, and some believe that many in your party aren't happy with your saying you won't support General Prayut as Prime Minister. Right now, how united is the Democrat Party?
Well, we are campaigning all together over the last month or so. None of us is doing anything else. We're all taking our message to the people. And even after the announcement about me not supporting Prayut or the party not supporting Prayut, everybody in the party understands that, because it reflects the party's ideology, and we need to be fair to voters.
Thai Rak Thai, the People's Power Party, and most recently Thai Raksa Chat were dissolved, and Yingluck was removed from the court from office by the courts. How will you overcome the suspicion that the military and the courts have consistently sided against the parties linked to Thaksin and sometimes to your benefit?
Well, you need to look at things case by case, and you also have to recognize that there have been a number of rulings that have gone for those parties as well. The most recent ruling on the Future Forward Party being, accused of not telling the truth about Thanathorn's personal bio has been thrown out by the EC. But when ruling goes against them, they complain that it's all politically motivated. So you have to look at things case by case. It's not for me to defend the decisions of the court, but if there is evidence that they are siding with one side or another, that evidence should be used to prosecute the people making these decisions, because they have that option to do so. Kun Thaksin's case, there was evidence of attempted bribery on the part of Kun Thaksin. So it's hardly as if the people accusing the court is behaving in a way that is straightforward.
Now, Future Forward leader Thanathorn told me he would bring Thaksin and Yingluck back to face new trials under neutral judges, and they'd have to face the consequences if the judges ruled against them. Would you consider that as a way to win the trust of rural voters who haven't responded to Democrat campaign promises to help the poor, starting actually back in the 2005 election?
I'm sorry. There's two separate questions there, right? One about bringing back Thaksin and Yingluck. Our stance is that everybody has to be equal under the law. So Thaksin Yingluck should be held accountable and go through the process. But there's a difference between saying that and what Thanathorn said. Thanathorn actually said he would reopen some of the cases. Now that's different, because that seems to suggest that he's trying to overrule some of the past rulings. Otherwise, why would you reopen the cases?
Well, I guess he would argue that he considers the judges weren't neutral, and so justice may not have been done.
What evidence is there for that? And as I said, that ruling was made under a government that was under one of Thaksin's party. It was Palang Prachachon era when that judgment was made. And as I said, there was an attempted bribery of the judges before by Thaksin's lawyer. I mean, what evidence does Kun Thanathorn have that case was biased against Kun Thaksin? If he's not satisfied with the ruling, that's not reason enough to reopen the case.
So you would not agree with that? You would not countenance?
Not reopen cases, but Kun Thaksin and Yingluck has to face many other cases still awaiting them. So I didn't quite catch how that relates to your second part of the question about rural voters.
The question was really that since the 2005 election, you have made a series of populist promises in your campaigns that would genuinely help poor people, but they don't seem to have responded to those campaigns, possibly because they feel like the Democrat Party has sided with other forces against Thaksin-linked parties. And if you were to make a gesture towards the red shirts in that sense, would that help reconcile that gap?
Okay, I get you now. Well, first of all, taking 2005 elections as a benchmark, in the last couple of campaigns, we've increased our number of votes from around 7 million in 2005 to over 10 million. So I don't think you can say that there has been no response. We have increased our share of the vote. In 2005, we were behind Thai Rak Thai by 12 million votes. In the last couple of campaigns, we were only behind by, in one case, less than 1 million, in another, about 2 million votes. So I don't think you can say that there's been no response. Now, I would certainly love to have more people support me, and I'm working hard to do so by offering the policies that we are now offering, and we think are the most concrete policies to solve their problems. You know, you talk about the rice scheme. Now, Pheu Thai has a very vague policy of saying that it would try to lift the price of rice, but cannot say how it would do so, because they are not going to repeat the rice pledging scheme, which has completely failed. So we have the policies, and we will do more to address their concerns. But we don't think that it is right to interfere with the law just to please people and to win votes.
Now, if General Prayut does wind up as Prime Minister with only, say, a quarter of the votes in the House, would you join any no-confidence motions in him? And if there is parliamentary gridlock, can you categorically rule out supporting another coup?
Well, to the second question, absolutely yes, because I've never supported any coups, right? For the first question, the no confidence motion we would join in when there are reasons to do so. So we're not going to go in and say, well, if Kun Prayut forms a government, we have to go straight into a no confidence motion. We have to have good reasons to push that motion through. So we have to wait and see what he does as Prime Minister. But I should say that if he tries to form a government with, as you say, a quarter of the votes in the House, it doesn't look like a stable government to me.
And finally, Kun Abhisit, for you personally, you became Prime Minister in 2008, not because you were elected, but because a group of former...
Which
Correct.
is what parliamentary system.
That's true, but
as in other Western countries.
But still, would you not feel better if you...
candidate in a parliamentary vote with the most number of votes. The candidate that was running against me was from a smaller party.
But how much...
Crucial about that.
How much better would you feel, though, if you were to become Prime Minister again as a result of winning the popular vote?
Oh, a lot. There's no question about that. I'm just saying that often it's the events leading up to me getting the premiership last time has been misrepresented. It was through a normal parliamentary process. But obviously, I'd love to have a mandate from the ballot box straight away, rather than waiting for a second chance.
Kun Abhisit, thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome.